Hello and welcome to Cocktails with a Twist of History, your digital destination for all things cocktails. I'm footloose and fancy-free. This was the term for having no attachments. The cocktail was called the Fancy-Free, and the recipe first appeared in 1941 and was served straight up, and the distinguishing mark was that it had a sugared rim. The cocktail book was written by a guy named Crosby Gage, and the title was Cocktail Guide and Lady's Companion. Wow. I'm sorry, but Crosby Gage does not look like a ladies' man. Crosby Gage was kind of a Martha Stewart, so I guess what he said held a lot of influence at the time. Crosby Gage was a high-profile theater producer, a writer, and a socialite. The papers said it was, quote, difficult to avoid the figure of Crosby Gage in the high society of New York. The second cocktail book that he wrote was called The Standard Cocktail Guide, and that was in 1944, and I don't think it was very popular, even at the time. He was writing to a post-Prohibition crowd, and by 1941, Prohibition was just a bad memory. By the way, compare Crosby Gage to some of the other figures at the time, the other Crosby, Bing Crosby, and even Ronald Reagan. Who am I to judge? Okay, I have been talking way too long without a drink in my hand. Let's make a fancy-free. So it is a stirred cocktail, even though it doesn't actually say that it is, but it's got to be. And here we are going to have a straight-up cocktail with an orange rim on the inside and the sugar on the outside. So we are going to start with 2 ounces of rye whiskey. Here we go. Sometimes you can use bourbon. I'm actually using bourbon here. But here we go. There is the bourbon. That is actually a cask strength bourbon that I am using. We are going to need a ½ ounce of our maraschino liqueur, which we said is a light cherry kind of liqueur. Here we go. And we're going to put in a ½ ounce over here. ½ ounce of our maraschino. Now we need 1 dash of an Angostura bitters. Here we have our Angostura bitters. 1 dash of that. And 1 dash of an orange bitters. So we have our orange bitters. Here we go. Got our dashes of that. And this, like we said, is going to be a stirred cocktail. And we are going to add our ice. And we're going to stir it. Here we go. Make sure you have, whoops, a little bit of splash there. Make sure you have your ice. Lots of ice. Here we go. And we are going to stir. This needs a little bit of stirring, especially here I'm using the cask strength bourbon, so it's a little bit on the strong side. So I'm going to add a little bit of the dilution there. And we are going to pour it in to our cocktail with the orange. And let's take a look at this. Here we go. Cheers. Ooh. That is a really nice cocktail, though. With the sugared rim, it's kind of like the sidecar, which, by the way, I'm surprised I've never done a show about the sidecar. I guess we'll have to correct that soon. It really is like the improved whiskey cocktail, which had the bourbon or the rye, the maraschino liqueur, that had the simple syrup inside or the sugar inside. Sometimes it had absinthe. Definitely had the Angostura bitters. It was interesting. The later versions of this cocktail, the Fancy Free, added Canadian whiskey, and they dumped that later on to go to the bourbon, which was more popular at the time. It also dumps the simple syrup, and sometimes they used absinthe. Here, they're not. The Fancy Free is really, like I said, similar to the improved whiskey cocktail, which was after the whiskey cocktail, which would later be called the old-fashioned. From the days of the cocktails in the second half of the 1800s, the bartenders took their license to change the cocktails to suit their mood. The improved whiskey cocktail was really one of those early cocktails where they just changed it up so that they could be different than the bar down the block. The Fancy Free is a nice cocktail, but with apologies to Crosby Gage, the Martha Stewart or not, it's not that different. So other than the sugared rim and the name. As always, if you have other pieces of the history, we want to know it. Please, you can put it in the comments, you can send it to us by email, or you can tell it to the bottle. We want to know. Also, please make sure to like, subscribe, and to send a link of this show to somebody else so they can enjoy cocktails with a twist of history. Thank you.